Good day, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, The Monsanto Papers, a conversation about cancer and accountability. I'm Jen Hawes, Partnership Manager at Island Press. Before we begin today, I'd like to go over some logistics. The webinar today will flow as follows. We'll have a brief presentation from Carey Gillam on her new book, The Monsanto Papers. Following that, Mackenzie Feldman of Herbicide-Free Campus will conduct a brief presentation. We'll then introduce Michael Miller and Lee Johnson. Michael was a lawyer in the case against Monsanto and Lee is a plaintiff. After the presentations, we'll open it up to audience questions and Mackenzie will moderate our discussion. You may submit questions at any time during the presentation. To do so, use the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel, which should be on the right side of your screen. If you have any problems, there's also a chat box to connect with the organizers. Following the webinar, you'll receive a brief survey. Your feedback is imperative, so please fill out that survey. We appreciate that. And this webinar is being recorded today. Now, I want to make sure that you know that Carey's book is on sale. We are having a ebook sale, $4.99 this week through the 23rd. Please feel free to get your copy at that great price from any of your ebook providers. Or if you'd like a physical copy, we're giving 30% off with the code webinar from islandpress.org. Now, I'd like to give you a little information about Island Press. We are an environmental nonprofit book publisher. Founded in 1984, our mission is to provide the best ideas and information to those seeking to understand and protect the environment. We elevate voices of change, shine a spotlight on crucial ideas, and focus attention on sustainable solutions like we're doing today. And the Herbicide-Free Campus is our co-sponsor of this webinar today. Herbicide-Free Campus envisions a toxic-free world created by student action. Their mission is to empower the next generation of environmental leaders to create safer, more sustainable living and learning environments for all by starting locally and advocating for organic land care on their campuses. I'd like to introduce our panelists now today. Carey Gillam is with us. She is an investigative journalist that has spent more than 20 years reporting on health and environmental impacts through the agrochemical industry, including 17 years working for Reuters news agency. She is the research director of the nonprofit consumer group US Right to Know. Her 2017 book about pesticide dangers, Whitewash, won the 2018 Rachel Carson Book Award for the Society of Environmental Journalists. Carey is a recognized international expert on corporate control of agriculture and the health and environmental impacts of pesticide-dependent food systems. She has been asked to testify before the European Parliament and was an invited speaker to the World Forum for Democracy in Strasbourg, France in 2019. She resides in Overland Park, Kansas with her husband and 3 children. Mackenzie Feldman is the founder and executive director of Herbicide-Free Campus, an organization that works with students around the country to advocate for an end to the spraying of synthetic herbicides at schools and a transition to organic land management. Her campaign resulted in the entirety of the University of California system going glyphosate-free, and Mackenzie has worked with the coalition to get herbicides banned from every public school in the state of Hawaii. Mackenzie is also a food sovereignty research assistant for the FAO and a food research fellow for Data for Progress. Michael J. Miller has been in the private practice for 30 years, representing those injured and aggrieved in cases of personal injury. He received his undergraduate degree in political science from the University of Maryland in 1975. Immediately following, he pursued a legal degree from the University of Baltimore, receiving his doctorate in jurisprudence in 1978. Mr. Miller is routinely appointed by federal and state judges to lead mass tort litigations. Currently, Mr. Miller is co-lead of the Roundup litigation in San Francisco. He's also appointed co-lead of the California State Roundup litigation and served as lead counsel to the first Roundup trial in America, resulting in $289 million verdict, and led counsel to the third Roundup trial in America, resulting in $1.37 billion and $1.18 billion for 2 plaintiffs. Mr. Miller is a pilot and father to 6 children. He's a highly qualified and experienced personal injury lawyer with an impeccable record of accomplishment. Lee Johnson is a California school groundskeeper who regularly worked with large quantities of both Roundup and Ranger Pro, 2 Monsanto herbicides. After a workplace incident left him drenched in one of the chemicals, Lee developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and the cancer is diagnosed as terminal. After his diagnosis, Lee went into battle against Monsanto and won. It's been 2 years since his landmark legal victory over the company. Johnson was awarded $289 million in damages. His case led to Bayer, the German drug maker that bought Monsanto, agreeing to pay nearly $11 billion to settle tens of thousands of similar claims. This has resulted in one of the largest ever settlements in U.S. civil litigation history. Now I'd like to hand over controls to Carey to give us a brief presentation.
All right, I've got to share my screen. See if we can do this. All right, can you see the presentation now, Jen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me here. I feel very lucky to be with this group. Let's see. All right, are we good? Now you can see everything?
Yep, looks perfect.
Okay, great. So the first thing I wanted to say is, tomorrow is Earth Day, and I just wanted to make note of that because as a journalist who's covered the agrochemical industry, food and farming and the environment for, the last 20 some years, I have become really profoundly aware of, what we're doing to the environment and what we're doing to ourselves. And what I hope that people understand in all of the work that I do is that my message really is we're allowing our world to become sicker and sicker. We're allowing our air, our water, our food, and our environment, and critically our own selves to be contaminated with environmental toxins. They're making us weaker, they're making us vulnerable, and not just to, COVID-19 and what we've seen through this pandemic, but also to cancers and other illnesses and health problems. We have so many people who are suffering now. And I really think we owe it to our children, and our grandchildren and their children and grandchildren to try to change the path that we're on. And I think Earth Day is really a good reminder for us that we need to care for the earth as we care for our kids, because when we poison our planet, we're poisoning the future for our children. So we call this a conversation about cancer and accountability. And I think that, that is really what this book speaks to, is accountability. People trying to hold corporations accountable. Lee and Mike Miller can both speak to that. They're both champions in that regard. But we all really need to work for more accountability because there are a range of companies and a whole range of chemicals that are endangering public and environmental health right now. So to get to the book, this is about one man, Lee Johnson. He is the protagonist or the main character that we follow throughout the book. Lee, sadly, has suffered horribly from a type of non-Hodgkin lymphoma that manifests in the skin. As the book details, Lee was working and living a pretty good life, working as a groundskeeper for a school district in California, trying to be, a good provider for his family, his 2 little boys. Lee grew up without his own father really active in his life, and he wanted to make sure that he was there for his boys. And he was doing everything he could to make a good life for them. So he worked hard, but one of his jobs for the school district was to spray herbicide made with this chemical called glyphosate. And it was the job was to spray it around the school district's sports fields and playgrounds and areas to keep those areas free from weeds. And the product that he used, these glyphosate products, were Monsanto products. He used Ranger Pro, which is similar to Roundup, made by Monsanto, as we said, with the active ingredient glyphosate. Monsanto introduced glyphosate about 40 years ago, And for decades now, it's been used by homeowners on lawns and gardens, groundskeepers on parks and schoolyards where kids play. It's used in golf courses, and farmers use glyphosate quite frequently, growing their crops and leaving residues of this chemical on the food that we all consume. It's the world's most widely used weed-killing chemical. Government researchers have found that it's so pervasive now that we find residues not only in the food that we eat and the water that we drink, but also in air samples and sometimes even in rainfall. Monsanto has always maintained that it's very safe. Nobody needs to worry about it. Lee felt pretty comfortable using it, even though he knew he needed to wear protective gear. But the book follows Lee as he goes to work, and he has an accident where he is dosed with this or doused in this weed-killing chemical, and how he comes to find that his once perfect skin, he always liked to say he had perfect unblemished skin, becomes diseased and really ravaged with lesions and cancer. And he seeks answers. He tries to reach out to Monsanto and find out if his exposure to this chemical could have caused his cancer, but he really doesn't get any answers from Monsanto. So then he reaches out. He sees an ad one day, and you're following Lee through this journey. He sees an ad for a law firm in Virginia, and he reaches out, and it's Mike Miller's firm. And Mike is learning as well more and more about Roundup and glyphosate and ties to cancer and concerns by scientists around the world that there's a link to non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And so the story introduces you to not only Mike Miller, but these other lawyers that Mike works with and that Mike knows, and how they come together to really make this historic case against Monsanto. None of them have ever really taken on a pesticide company or Monsanto. They're all pretty skilled in sort of pharmaceutical work or medical device work, working on behalf of consumers who've been injured, but they've never taken on Monsanto. And they find that it's a really different kind of mountain to climb, I guess. So you follow these lawyers, and you see that the thing that drew them into this litigation really was this March 2015 classification by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, declaring glyphosate to be a probable human carcinogen. This is a group that's part of the World Health Organization, and it's part of their job and has been for many decades to look at commonly used substances, things that we are all exposed to perhaps in large quantities over a long-term basis, and to understand the carcinogenicity risk. IARC determined that with glyphosate that there was strong evidence of genotoxicity, and they said that this was both for pure glyphosate and for these glyphosate formulations like Roundup, and this was particularly important and would become very important during the trial. So the lawyers are drawn in, they see that this international agency has made this connection, and they start doing discovery. They file their litigation, they begin discovery where they get these internal documents from Monsanto. And it's just really, that's a fascinating thing that I found, is how they get actually millions of pages of internal documents from Monsanto, and how they then have to figure out a way to sift through all of that and dig up what they need, as evidence of trial. One of the first things that the Miller firm saw as they were going through some of these documents was this one. And I think Mike might tell you that they thought this one was a pretty good one. They, even though Monsanto had told the world and regulators, for 40 some years, that there was no reason to be worried about its chemical, about its products. There was no way it could cause cancer. You see the scientist inside Monsanto saying internally to other colleagues, we can't say Roundup's not a carcinogen. We haven't done the necessary testing on the formulation to make that statement. And this became an important point. A lot of people don't realize that our EPA and regulators in the EU and elsewhere don't require long-term carcinogenicity testing on these products that people are exposed to so regularly. They require significant testing on the active ingredient, but not on the actual combination of chemicals that come together in a Roundup or Ranger Pro. The other things that they found, I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly so that Mike can elaborate if he wishes to, but the other things that came out was ghostwriting. A lot of people have heard about this. This is not an uncommon practice, sadly. It certainly was not unique to Monsanto. We've seen, ghostwriting examples in pharmaceutical and other industries as well. It's not considered a very ethical practice, certainly, but companies often engage in this because they know that if papers or information comes out about the safety of its products or promoting its products, it looks more credible if it comes from a supposed independent or third party than if it comes from the company. For Monsanto, one of the first things that we saw regarding ghostwriting was how they wanted to develop some papers to get published, some new scientific papers that would counter this International Agency for Research on Cancer and basically rebut it and say, those scientists are wrong, they're crazy, they were politically motivated. There's no evidence that this causes cancer. And so Monsanto discusses internally here, this is actually even before the official classification was announced, but Monsanto anticipated, we saw in documents, they anticipated that they were going to get a probable or possible carcinogen rating for glyphosate. So they put in place this plan, and you can see here in this excerpt from the email that they actually use the word ghostwrite, and they talk about wanting to do this. They could find authors to edit and sign their names, but we would be doing the writing. And recall that is how we handled William Crozon Monroe 2000. William Crozon Monroe was a very important study, a very important paper that was published in the year 2000 because it was foundational for regulators around the world. It declared no reproductive harm, no cancer risk. Glyphosate is, the be-all, end-all of safe chemicals. Another ghostwriting example that we learned about through the Monsanto internal documents that we call the Monsanto Papers was the ghostwriting of magazine articles. Forbes was a common target for these ghostwritten pieces, but we saw in these documents that Monsanto went back and forth, and they did edits. They had a PR firm involved, and they really wanted to get these papers out there defending glyphosate, and this Henry Miller, this academic, was more than willing to put his name on this and get this published. Now, once Forbes became aware of this, they did pull down these things that had Henry Miller's name on them because they were known to be ghostwritten then. Another example that we saw in the internal Monsanto papers was Monsanto's employment of a media house that would write op-eds and letters to the editor that could be placed in newspapers and news outlets around the country. And they would find people's names to be authors, in quotes you see here. But Potomac writers would do the heavy lift, and then they would get those placed. And again, this is so it looks like third-party independent people are speaking out and writing about the safety of glyphosate. And this was a paper, this was not actually about glyphosate necessarily, it was more about GMO grain being fed to livestock. But this again was a Monsanto scientist, and he's talking here about, he's written a paper, he really wants it to look like it didn't come from Monsanto, he wants it to look like it's a non-Mon paper. But he's concerned he's not going to be able to find academics who will just want to take something they did not produce and slap their names on it. Plenty of questionable EPA interactions that we saw in the internal Monsanto documents. There was one sort of story or saga that I wrote about, many reporters wrote about it because it seemed so just egregious and outrageous. This was around the time as well, 2015, when IARC was making its classification of glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen. And this agency that's part of Health and Human Services, which is called the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ATSDR, wanted to do a review of glyphosate as well, wanted to look at the toxicity. Certainly this was because so much evidence was building at that time, scientific research from around the world indicating that there was a problem with this chemical. ATSDR is looking at this. Monsanto decides, you know what, we really don't want them to look at this. This could be another IARC, and they jump to ask the EPA to help them. Several individuals within the EPA at the very top levels of the Office of Pesticide Programs. There are emails that talk about Jim Jones and Jack Hausinger and others who essentially jump to help Monsanto intervene with ATSDR. And you see, this became a rather famous email. Individual in EPA that was responsible for the cancer assessment review of glyphosate, Jess Rowland. And Jess Rowland here, Monsanto considers him to be quite a good friend. And this internal email, they're discussing a conversation that one of them had with Jess, and Jess is willing to help try to kill this ATSDR review. And you see that they relate that Jess has told them, if I can kill this, I should get a medal. Monsanto doesn't know if they actually can kill it, but it's really good to know they're going to make the effort. And then you see in this other email, again, a reference to Jess Rowland. He'll be retiring from the EPA. He could be useful as we move forward with ongoing glyphosate defense. And these sorts of interactions seem very worrisome. They were worrisome enough to get the Office of Inspector General to say that they would take a deeper look into these cozy connections. Front groups, this is another thing that we knew about to a degree, but we learned much more about through the discovery documents. These are certain chemical industry propaganda groups that are aligned in different ways with Monsanto, Bayer, BASF, Syngenta, DuPont, Dow. The American Council on Science and Health has been a particularly active friend to industry. They have always proclaimed themselves to be independent of industry, but the internal documents showed that they, not only had relied on Monsanto funding in the past, but really wanted more Monsanto funding. Reached out, wanted to remind Monsanto how helpful they were in the defense of glyphosate. And you see this Monsanto executive here saying, we don't have a lot of supporters. We can't afford to lose the few that we have. Well aware of the challenges with ACSH, but you will not get a better value for your dollar than ACSH. And this particular organization, again, has been very active in targeting and trying to smear and harass and criticize people like myself and lawyers like Mike and scientists like those who sat on the International Agency for Research on Cancer. All of this sort of evidence of deceptive and tactics led these judges to make these quotes in relation to the trials and the evidence that they were allowing in. You see this one is the federal judge who has been overseeing the multi-district litigation. There's a fair amount of evidence that the only thing Monsanto cared about was undermining the people who were raising concerns about whether Roundup caused cancer. Monsanto didn't seem concerned at all about getting at the truth of whether glyphosate caused cancer. This is a summary, really, of where we are or where we've been. Approximately 100,000 U.S. plaintiffs. Mike might have better information for us. All allege Monsanto's Roundup caused non-Hodgkin lymphoma and that Monsanto covered up the risks. 3 trials completed so far. You can see the jury awards here. Importantly, the jurors found that Monsanto acted with malice in failing to warn of the risks. And last summer, Bayer, which bought Monsanto in 2018, agreed to pay close to $11 billion to settle the majority of these cases. And just as we wrap up here, I want to go back to what I said earlier. I think Monsanto, the story of Monsanto and Roundup and Lee Johnson and these lawyers, it's a fascinating story. As I watched it all unfold, I said, my gosh, this has got to be a movie. I can't make a movie. I can write a book. I went to Island Press. I've got to write this. This is just crazy, some of the stuff that's happening here and the twists and turns. But the bigger picture is it's not just Monsanto or Bayer. It's not just one chemical. We're on the wrong path. Cancer is becoming so common now. Approximately 40% of men and women in the U.S. are expected to be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetimes. That's a crazy number, and we should not get complacent about that. I think everybody listening knows somebody who's had cancer or has cancer now or has died of it or is surviving or living with cancer. We need to learn to live without cancer. You see these numbers, more than 600,000 in the US died last year, and more than 1.8 million were newly diagnosed. Pediatric cancers are on the rise. Worldwide, the numbers are growing. Cancers in young children are increasing, especially little kids, childhood leukemia and brain tumors and rare liver tumors. Scientific research shows us that pesticides are connected not only to non-Hodgkin lymphoma, but multiple myeloma, prostate, liver, pancreatic, lung, non-melanoma skin cancers, and a range of reproductive problems, including infertility. Pesticides are damaging to children's brain development. Our U.S. National Toxicology Program is, saying this, and NIEHS, and we have scientists and academics around the country that are telling us if we want to reduce cancer and other diseases, we've got to address environmental causes, and that includes pesticides. DDT, this is a study that just came out last week. DDT exposure is linked to cancer risks 2 generations later. These are women who were exposed in the 60s and then had babies, and those babies had babies, and they're still seeing increased risks tied to those women who had DDT in their blood serum in the 60s. Pesticides. 1 billion pounds of pesticides are used in the United States each year, 75% in agriculture. You can read all this yourself. The USDA estimates 50 million Americans are getting their drinking water from groundwater contaminated with pesticides. Pesticide residues, as we said earlier, are commonly found in foods, including fruits and vegetables, and cereals and snacks, and things that we're feeding our kids, our babies. This is again, 2018 scientific paper, human exposure to pesticides is ubiquitous. More than 90% of our US population now is determined to have detectable concentrations of pesticides in their urine or blood. And that's not glyphosate only, that's glyphosate and chlorpyrifos and dicamba, 2,4-D. It's a range of insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides. And we're getting a lot of this through the food that we're eating. The United Nations has called for a comprehensive new global treaty to regulate and phase out the dangerous use of pesticides and move towards more sustainable practices. They recognize excessive use of pesticides are very dangerous to human health and to the environment. Not just us humans, right, at risk. More than 40% of insect species are declining, a third are endangered. The scientists tell us intensive agriculture, heavy use of pesticides is contributing to this plummeting this insect apocalypse, some call it. Birds are vanishing from North America. The silent spring that Rachel Carson warned us about all those many years ago, is coming true. And so just to conclude, I want to say, as we said earlier, Earth Day is a reminder to us all. We should care for the earth as we care for our children, because the two are inextricably linked. We cannot separate the two. If we poison our planet, we poison our kids, we poison their future. It's only really if we work to nurture and sustain the planet that we provide a healthy home for generations to come. And that concludes my talk. Thank you. Jen, can you get us back?
Thank you, Carey. Yep, I am switching over to Mackenzie.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And if you just give me screen sharing. Hi, everyone. Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Carey, for that overview of the issue. And if you haven't read the Monsanto Papers yet, highly, highly recommend. Try not to spoil it too much in our discussion. As Jen mentioned, my name is Mackenzie Feldman, and I'm the Executive Director of Herbicide-Free Campus. And we are an organization that works with students around the country to eliminate herbicides from schools and work with groundskeepers to transition to organic land management. This was a photo taken pre-COVID at one of our work days. In the chalk, you can see it says using hands, not herbicides, and that's a huge part of our mission. Here you can just look at our vision and our mission, and really what we focus on is empowering student leaders. We work with students all over the country, and we train them on how to build power and create teams and work with groundskeepers and really do advocacy and show up for work days and really understand soil health, so that you can come to groundskeepers with the alternatives, because we know that, if you're asking groundskeepers to stop spraying, it's often more labor intensive. And so we really want the students to be able to show up and show that they're committed and are willing to pick weeds alongside groundskeepers in order to, really have a campus that works for everyone, that's safe, and that's not sprayed with toxic chemicals. So just a little bit about the history of Herbicide-Free Campus. This was started by me and my fellow teammate and good friend and staff at Herbicide-Free Campus. We were playing beach volleyball at UC Berkeley, and our coach said one day, if the ball rolls off the court, don't go and chase it, because an herbicide had just been sprayed everywhere around the court. And this was, Carey mentioned the World Health Organization in 2015 had declared glyphosate a probable carcinogen. And so we wanted to find out what was sprayed, and we found out it was Ranger Pro, the Monsanto herbicide that has the active ingredient glyphosate. So they were spraying a probable carcinogen around where we were practicing. And so Bridget and I met with the groundskeeper, and we just said, can we pick the weeds by hand instead of you spraying this? And he said, sure, I just don't have the staff to pick the weeds, but if your team wants to do it, sure. So our team started picking the weeds before practice, and we really only had to do it a couple of times. It wasn't a big deal. And so that area is no longer sprayed with herbicides. And we thought, wow, this is a really, interesting model of having students involved in order to stop the spray. And so we decided to expand it to the rest of campus. We formed a student group, we got involved with student government, and we ended up getting an opportunity we got a grant to bring a professional horticulturist to UC Berkeley and train our groundskeepers on transitioning the two largest green spaces to organic land management. So this professional, Chip Osborne, he taught our groundskeepers how to do overseeding and compost tea and aeration and all these things so that they didn't have to spray toxic chemicals. And then I graduated and found myself in San Francisco at the trial of Lee Johnson versus Monsanto, because I was really interested in this. And I'm from Hawaii, and Hawaii is ground zero for industrial agriculture, and they spray an immense amount of chemicals. Monsanto, now Bayer, a lot of these large chemical corporations have a big presence in Hawaii. And so this was an issue I had been following as I grew up. And so I knew about the issue when this happened to me at the beach volleyball court. I was aware that, pesticides were dangerous. And so I was really interested in going to this trial because nobody ever took on Monsanto. And I was really compelled by Lee's story. And we ended up befriending each other in the trial. And Lee is now an advisor for a campaign, and just so much gratitude for everything that he's done for this movement. I know he calls himself the accidental activist and didn't mean to get into this, and with this horrible tragedy that he's going through. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, but just the fact that he is willing to put time into preventing people from going through what he's going through is so inspiring, and he's a big mentor for our students. So anyways, we expanded this campaign to other UC schools. And when the UC University of California president heard about the glyphosate trial, they wanted to ban glyphosate at the UCs because of potential litigation. And our student activists really pushed the president, and we did petitions and showed up to a bunch of regents meetings. And so yeah, we got the UC system to ban glyphosate on all 10 campuses. And as Carey said, it's not just glyphosate. There's so many other chemicals, and so we're really pushing the UCs to transition to fully organic. And in 2020, we were working with 18 schools in 10 states. We have 7 staff. We launched a high school pilot project, and this year we really decided to hone in and create an accelerator program. So we're working with 6 schools in 6 states, and our goal by the end of 2021 is to get all 6 of these schools to become completely herbicide free, and then we can move on to more schools. But our vision is, for every school in the country to be herbicide free, not just universities, but every school. And obviously, this issue is much larger than schools, and what our students and our staff, we really want to see farm workers protected and get these toxic chemicals out of agriculture. And we believe that if we can get this done at schools, it can have ripple effects in the community and in agriculture. All right, and yeah, here's a photo of me and Lee. We brought him in the summer of 2019. We brought Lee and his family to Hawaii, and we went to a bunch of islands and met with the Department of Education and Parks and Rec and many different decision makers. And they were so compelled by Lee's story. It's one thing if just a bunch of activists are saying to stop spraying, but if it's a groundskeeper, Lee knew how it went, knew why people were spraying. It's obviously much easier sometimes to spray, and so people, he could really speak that language, and people could, understand from him. And when he says, I sprayed this, I got sick, I don't want anybody to be spraying this anymore and have to go through what I'm going through, and people were really compelled by that. And by the end of the trip, we got herbicides banned from every public school in the state of Hawaii, and it was a huge victory. And so we're so thankful for Lee for taking the time to really stand up and use his platform. And we're still, we talk all the time about plotting our next move and how we're going to do this in California and beyond. And so Lee is a huge inspiration to us, and you'll hear from him in a bit. And here's just some photos of our students with the groundskeepers. And again, Lee just taught us a lot of valuable lessons about coming to the groundskeepers with not being mad at them for spraying. They're, at the end of the day, they're the people that are the most affected and the people who are the most exposed. And so you have to, what we really try and teach our students is that you have to come at it with an offer to help. And it's been really successful so far for us. Here you can just see a little graphic about, I love this graphic because it shows the intersections of herbicides. And the toxin space is maybe one that not a lot of people are familiar with if you're not in this circle, but I think it intersects with so many different issues, if you care about food systems or workers' rights or pollinator health. And so, maybe if you're on this webinar, you're already involved in this, but if not, we really, just think about an issue that matters to you, and I guarantee that there probably is some connection, if it's in the environmental space, to herbicides. Thank you so much. If you're interested in getting involved with Herbicide-Free Campus, you can email us, follow us on these social medias. And I just wanted to make a quick plug. We have a campaign that we're doing to pressure Home Depot and Lowe's to ban Roundup from their shelves. It's crazy that it's still sold in most mainstream, stores. So if you're interested in this, email Paolo from Friends of the Earth, put his email here. He might be on this webinar, but since there's no chat option, he might not be able to give a plug. So I just wanted to say that. Please take his email down and email if you're interested in getting involved with this campaign. And that is all I got.
Thanks,
Thank
Mackenzie.
you so much.
If everyone wants to turn on their webcams, please do.
And Lee's calling in from his phone, so we won't be able to see him, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And feel free to put your questions in the chat. We have a few here so far, but please do ask your questions. Mackenzie will get us started with a few for our panel, but we will be asking your questions as well.
Sounds good. Before I start diving into questions, Mike or Lee, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Lee, you want to go first? I'll go. Yeah, my name is Lee Johnson. I am the guy who took Monsanto to court and won with the help of several people. My story is very, I don't know if it's difficult or complex or whatever. I guess it gets difficult when you talk about my illness or whatever. But yeah, I was exposed to Ranger Pro a couple of times over there at my old job in Benicia, and it affected me very seriously and gave me cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, and it's a skin and blood cancer, and it's very serious. It's very intense, and I've been pretty close to death a few times. Um, I'm in a dip right now because of switching healthcare and other things and personal stuff. But yeah, that's my story. I mean, I just introduced myself a little bit. It's just a guy that was basically doing his job, got exposed to chemicals, ended up with cancer, found out the source or origination of my cancer, and ended up getting a lot of support behind that and getting other people to help if they need it, and getting this thing to be something that can be heard in the courts throughout the U.S. So I'm just happy to be here, happy to still be alive, and I'm happy to be a part of the cause and able to help out in whatever way I can. Thank you.
Amen. I'm Mike Miller, and it's been an amazing honor, and I mean that, to represent Lee Johnson over the last 5 years. I got to know him not as a client, but as a man, as a father, as a husband. He's a real keeper. The guy's a real keeper, and he fought this, and is still fighting this, and pray God we'll beat this. And it's been the tip of the spear. I mean, everybody knows, 100,000 clients, $11 billion, and all these huge verdicts. That's great, but you have to meet Lee Johnson to know that this book that Carey wrote about, it's like the Pelican Brief. I mean, it's like Lee and I and a bunch of other people lived this. It was crazy. And Carey lived it with us. I mean, I was in court on Monsanto for once a week at least for 5 years. And every time we came out of court, there's Carey Gillam writing down in her paper and asking people questions. So if you haven't read the book, for God's sakes, go read the book. Carey's right. The only person that wasn't in that courtroom when that verdict was read that I wish would have been there was Rachel Carson, because I just know the year I got out of high school, she wrote a book that moved me then, and it's moved me since. And it's young people like Mackenzie that are going to carry this on long after this old man slowed down. So hats off to you, Mackenzie. I love what you're doing. I just think it's amazing. What to say when after 38 years of practicing law, I decided, I'm going to go take down Monsanto. And most of my friends said, hey, you're batshit crazy. Don't do it. You're going to lose what little money you have and respect you have because you're going to get killed. You can't beat them. But we never took no for an answer. And Carey showed a ragtag group of lawyers that were with us, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. And having a good guy like Lee Johnson as a client made it all that much more fun. And I'll give you one anecdote, then I'll yield the floor. And Carey talked about a lot of the amazing things, but really two anecdotes. Dr. Perry, we found out early in the ball game that Monsanto had gone in 2001 to an independent scientist to see if it was possible Roundup caused cancer. And he told him, yeah, it's real possible. Do a couple simple tests and you'll know right away. Did they do the test? Hell no. Instead, they made him sign a confidentiality agreement to never talk about it. And on they went, selling billions and billions of dollars of Roundup after that to people like Lee Johnson. So getting the truth out matters. Carey got it out. And as hard as we worked for Lee, we wanted Lee to be the first one to trial. We wanted to tell Lee's story. So there's evidence that came out since Lee's trial that's even more compelling. We talk about Hawaii. Monsanto's a convicted felon now for what they did in Hawaii. That's just a fact, all right? I mean, they're a convicted felon. We now know there might be some people watching this webinar, it can't be that bad. The EPA still approves it. Well, they got it on the market by criminally preparing studies. When I say criminally, is that just some crazy old lawyer talking? No. One of the scientists at Monsanto was convicted of a crime and went to jail for these studies, right? He appealed it all the way to the appellate courts, the highest courts in America. his conviction was affirmed and off to jail he went. That's how they got Roundup on the market. That's how it wound up in your local Home Depot. Now, why the system can't get it off, I don't know. But thank your neighborhood trial lawyer for helping fill in that gap, fill in that vacuum where the EPA never goes. That's it. I'm happy to be part of this. Thanks, Carey.
I'm so glad you brought up the Perry study. I keep trying to figure out how to pack all of that into my slideshow. You know, the Perry study. So.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I think I'm going to start by asking some questions to the panelists, and keep coming with your questions, and then we will stop and take questions from the audience. So yeah, ask anything in the chat. Thank you, Mike, for that, and for Lee, but all of you for being here. I wanted to start with Mike. You know, in the book, there's just so many crazy moments where you all are discovering different documents. Why did you decide to first take on Monsanto, and did you know that you would be discovering, you know, that kind of crazy evidence and emails, or were you really surprised by that?
So every time we sue a corporation, we find some emails that we go, oh my God, moment. We thought we'd find a few, and we thought they'd be kind of bad, but the company tried like hell to explain them away. But Mackenzie, when we got this first batch of emails, in order to get them, we had to file in a certain state where we could get them in a hurry, and we got them. Carey describes this young lawyer that works for me as lacking a little charisma, but being brilliant. Well, I think he's got a little charisma, but he is brilliant. And Jeff Travers is his name, but he came into my office with 5 or 6 documents that we were so appalled. We literally all worked late that night. And oh my gosh, we've got to get to trial. We've got to, the only way we can get these out into the world is to get to trial. And a young lawyer in my office said, I've got the guy for you, Lee Johnson. Jury's going to love him. So that's sort of how it rolled.
Yeah. And for Carey, can you walk people through just what this process was like to write this book? And I really like the way that you set it up in the book. I won't spoil it for people, but just, you know, getting these documents. Yeah, can you just describe a little bit about what it was like to write this? How did you get all of these details about the characters?
Well, it was, I mean, as Mike said, I spent a lot of time with these people, and I thank them in the book for giving me so much of their time and their generosity with that. You know, I really felt like they didn't let me be part of anything I shouldn't have been part of, but I did get to be there, the fly on the wall, for a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings and conferences, and to just really understand, first of all, the process, you know, and all the things that they had to put together to be able to bring this, you know, historic case to trial. And it was a real examination. I say this book not only, to me, I think is just a really crazy ride and a really compelling story of one man, Lee Johnson, and his struggle and his pain that he goes through with this cancer. I mean, I describe in a lot of detail what he's going through, but also these lawyers. Because you hear so many complaints about, you know, plaintiff's bar and mass tort and clogging up the courts and just exploiting plaintiffs and that kind of thing. But I really wanted people to understand that people like Mike and Amy and the other people who were involved in this, they literally do put millions of dollars of their own money and their lives and their reputations and their careers on the line. And, you know, there were some lawyers in this who were, you know, mortgaging their homes and taking out loans and doing all these things because they don't get paid unless they win, you know, and they stand to lose a lot of money, and it's years of their time. And so you see in the book, I think to a degree, the extent of that. And I don't think it's a perfect system. I know Mike, maybe he does. I think it's a highly imperfect system. I think we need our regulators to actually do their jobs and hold these companies accountable and protect public health, but they don't. And so, you know, these law firms are really, you know, the cavalry, as I describe in my book. You know, the cavalry's not coming. They are the cavalry. They're who we rely on. So I don't think I answered your question, but I followed these guys around as much as they would let me. I, paid attention to everything. I read a million documents. I visited Lee as much as he would allow me to, and I just tried to put it all into the book, really in a heartfelt way, hoping that readers would see this as a story that is important, and maybe cry a little bit, at the end.
When you wrote Whitewash, did you know at that point that there'd be a bigger story to tell later? Did you know all of these crazy documents would unravel, or were you surprised as you went through that journey?
Well, I knew that Monsanto had engaged in deception. I mean, that's a big part of whitewash. That's the name. I mean, we had already obtained freedom of information documents from regulators and universities, and so we knew to a degree that they had been whitewashing the story of this chemical for a really long time. And no, I did not think I would ever write another book. I think I told everybody I will never write another book, particularly about Monsanto, never. But then just, as I said, watching this, and the things that happened and the crazy accident that, my God, on the eve of trial, right, that almost killed Mike, and the other things that happened, like I said, I couldn't not write it, because I really wanted it to be a movie. I wanted people to see it and watch it. So can't make a movie, I can write a book. So
Thank you. And for Lee, you finished the case, you got your money. What makes you continue to advocate and speak out? You could just be spending all the time doing what you want. So yeah, what makes you, get out of bed in the morning and think that you want to continue to engage in this work?
I think it's just the importance of it that makes me stay motivated to stay involved. Um, it's just really an important issue. I tell a story about once this stuff was going on, it was very big in the media. It was on the news. It was on the internet. It was an extremely large public case. And I remember being in the line at Safeway one time. That's a local grocery store around here, if you folks don't know. But there was a lady, a couple of patrons ahead of me, and the store clerk asked her, did you check this out and make sure it doesn't have glyphosate in there? And the mother was kind of shocked. She was like, "What's glyphosate? I never heard of glyphosate." He said, "You never heard of glyphosate? You never wasn't done watching the news and the big trial about the guy with the cancer and the big verdict and all this stuff? You haven't been watching?" And she was like, "No, I never heard of it." He was like, "Yeah, there could be glyphosate in that baby food, so you want to check the sources of your food because you never know what it could be, what can be inside of it." So it's stories like that. It's the trips to Canada and hearing about Percy Sledger, and I think that's his last name. I know his first name is Percy. Hearing about people like that and uh, different stories that I heard about as I led up to getting help for myself from the Miller firm. That's what keeps me going. Is that, like I said in the very first news interview, is that this thing is much bigger than me. It's much bigger than just one guy with the cancer and my illness and being close to death and all that. It's a very serious situation for the environment, and I learned that right before I found the Miller firm. Found out about just how widespread this chemical is being used and how it's applied directly to some foods. It's not just sprayed around the roots or sprayed to kill weeds. They're treating wheat with this. They're spraying the corn directly with this, and it's just unbelievable to me that anybody would even want to think to spray anything on food that starts with the name pesticide. Because the word pesticide itself, as I was trained, it means to kill. So I don't get it, but I know that that's one of the reasons why I like to stay involved, is just to say whatever I can and bring whatever knowledge I can from a pest applicator, a pesticide applicator's perspective. And I think that's my responsibility. It's not even like I'm doing it for this reason or that reason. I feel like as if it's my responsibility for whatever part I played in spraying when I was spraying, not knowledgeable enough to know, you know, what I know now today. So therefore, I think it's very important to keep pushing and keep the word out there and keep the knowledge about, you know, the overuse of pesticides and what we're consuming in our food and what it's doing to the environment.
Yeah, yeah, it's really beautiful. Thank you, Lee. I know you say it's a responsibility, but I don't know if everyone in your position would do that. So we're all really grateful and in awe of how you've handled this situation. Um, for Mike, can you tell us a little bit about how, you know, you and Carey explained this in the book, but kind of started out with you and then all of these different lawyers coming together, and then kind of how at the end of this got handed to the Miller firm. Can you, I mean, to Baum Headland, because of the accident. Can you kind of just describe how all of these different lawyers from around the country came together to work on something and how that decision was made?
Jerry Garcia and Lee Johnson said it best. It was a long, strange trip, and it wasn't my time to go. You're right, Lee? I mean, yeah, you got to check, and I'm plugging it right now. You got to check out Lee Johnson's rap. It's not my time to go. If you haven't heard it, check it out. We brought in Baum Headland at the very end when I got hurt, and they helped out, and they were great. Obviously, we had great results, but you know, there's a footnote to this book, Carey, that you might need to write another one on. Okay. I mean, think of that amazing verdict that we had yesterday, and we finally had someone held responsible for the murder of George Floyd. Imagine if next week the judge said, nope, I'm going to find Officer Chauvin innocent, in spite of what the jury said. Right. Well, that's what Lee and I went through, right? After the jury returned that big verdict, the judge issued a tentative order saying, nope, I'm taking it away. I'm like, wait a minute. Since I was younger than Mackenzie, I believed in the right to trial by jury. We had a jury that was fair, even-minded, and brilliant, and spent 5 weeks reaching this decision, and judge gonna take it away. And so that's your next book, Carey. Lee, you remember walking in that courtroom packed with corporate suits for Monsanto with stupid grins on their faces because they thought it was being taken away. And Lee, I'm sure loves me and hates me. I know my wife does. But he had to love me that day. I mean, I did my best job ever. In the 42 years I practiced law, that was it. That was the best job I ever did because it came so much from the heart. That daggone it, I believed in this Constitution, this right. And these people who are here now, they came back because they were the jury and they decided this case. And you, judge, shouldn't take it away from them. And to the judge's credit, change your mind. She didn't take it away. And Carey can tell you, every step along the way, it's been, we win, but it's razor thin. We had a federal judge that said, I don't think I'm going to let you go forward. All right, I'm going to let you go forward. Razor thin every step of the way, but all the way to the promised land to get these victims what they deserve. And Lee, there's 100,000 people in this country that are going to get some small measure of justice. It's going to be because of you, Lee Johnson, because of you.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that. And
you should be.
Like I said, that's just one of the reasons that keeps me going because I never felt so much support and so much love from strangers and people that I don't know. And it definitely, ever since this case hit the news, the first time it hit the news, it's been a reach out from a bunch of different people like Mackenzie and other people who had their own struggles and their own situation with glyphosate and Monsanto and chemicals and whatever and cancer. And I just became a part of their story. So, yeah, like I said, I'm glad to still be here and be a part of it. And it's not my time. I'm still here struggling, but it's better than not being here at all. So, you know, I'm proud to be able to help and proud to be able to be a part of this. It's something big.
Can I ask Michael, say something?
Yeah.
You can hear me just, yeah, no, Mike, on that note, you're right. And I think it's important to point out, and I write about that in the epilogue of the book,
Good.
about what happened. You should read the epilogue. But
I read the book. I didn't read the epilogue.
but but these jurors were so, I mean, outraged. And I wonder that they wrote letters to the judge after she issued this tentative ruling and said, you know, how dare you? No, I mean, they were really, really upset about that. And many of them, you know, and I talked to them, of course, for the book, and still am in touch with some of them. Many of them have become motivated, much like Lee, like to be active and be more outspoken about this issue, because they were so moved by the trial, by Lee's plight, and the evidence that they saw. But I wondered, I thought it was extraordinary that these jurors took that length to communicate to the judge. Do you see that often, Mike?
No, never saw it before, and I try a gosh awful lot of jury trials. And just so people around the country aren't confused, while we were in San Francisco, 26 jurors were excused because maybe they couldn't be fair to Monsanto. These 12 that were picked were tried and true, fair and impartial. I mean, they weren't screaming liberals and trying to change the world. These were 12 hardworking people from a broad spectrum of the community who then became so invested in the tragedy, the needless tragedy that befell Lee from this, that they became activists. And I thought that was hope for America.
There was that one guy who had like 10 notebooks or something that he would bring. That was insane.
Yeah,
there was some
just
crazy
to chime
moments.
in on that jury, the jury really threw me off, because you know how you sit there and you try to read people by sitting here saying, well, this one has their eyes closed, or this one is looking out the window, or this one doesn't look like they care at all. You can't go on those looks, because it's almost like they're playing with you, like they're playing a role, because none of these people that I was looking at were anything like they were when that trial was over and we met in the back there. None of those folks were what their faces were saying. So you can't judge a book by the cover, especially a jury.
Yeah, yeah. That was quite a story. The story of the old man juror who Brent, you know, who was giving Brent the eye, and Brent thought if they'd lost the trial. I mean, just, I don't know.
I remember walking out after the verdict, and one of the jurors, this older woman, was kind of standing outside, and I was like, oh, wow, are you happy to be done with this? And she goes, oh, I can't wait to go home and Google Monsanto, because I had never heard of them before. I'm going to get a glass of wine and Google Monsanto now. And I said, oh, you'll need a bottle of wine for that one.
I want to know from Mike, and then I'll quit interrupting here. Did you think, truthfully, from the beginning that you guys could win this case? Or did you think it was, you know, 50-50?
New information. So I'd just been trying cases against a pharmaceutical company for bladder cancer. And IR came out on the second trial and said, yep, probably causes bladder cancer. So we had studied juror after juror after juror in that case, and we were taken back by how much prestige and respect and decisiveness IARC had on them. So once we saw IARC had concluded that Roundup was a probable human carcinogen for one specific cancer, we felt very optimistic. I mean, again, no one had ever won against Monsanto. You showed DDT. You can thank your friends at Monsanto for that. Agent Orange, thank your friends at Monsanto for it. A lot of lawyers over a lot of years had gone up against Monsanto and been chewed up, spit out. So on one hand, we're thinking, oh man, this is great, we're going ahead. But on the other hand, nobody else has won. How are we going to do it? So it was a mixed bag. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to tell you, I didn't really think you guys could pull it off. I guess because I'd seen Monsanto for 20 years as well, and they always prevailed. You know, they always won. But you guys really nailed them on that. I mean, they haven't won any of the appeals either. I mean, it's
no. We took over the appeal, as you know, in the post-trial motions. I had the privilege of arguing the appeal, and we're happy to report we won. We lost on one issue that, and again, they reduced the amount of damages because that was unfortunate. We felt they shouldn't have done that, but we won on everything else and pretty happy about that. We're waiting. We think we'll be arguing the Piliad appeal in June, but we haven't got a hard date yet. So, but Lee, I don't, you probably heard me tell you this at a basketball game or something, but I'll share it with everybody else. When I'm in ICU in the hospital with my kite surfing accident 3 days before trial, and I'm still thinking in my head, I'm getting out of this bed and I'm going to go try that case. Nancy, my wife, looked at me. She said, Lee Johnson's case has got to go forward. The story's got to be told, even if you're not there, buddy, and you're not going to be there. And she said, look, David, and bring in Bob Headlam, and let's get it done. And I'm like, go with it. So it killed me not to be the one to be there, but I'm so happy for Lee that, because we could have got a continuance with the lawyer in the hospital, but Nancy and I and Dave made the right decision, I think, to get Lee to trial. He deserved it, and that's what we did.
And you guys had laid all the groundwork. You had laid everything out already
I was in a box with a bow, and a big bow on it, but I wasn't there to open the box. And somebody needed to open the box and show it to the jury, and Dave Dickens and Brent Wisner did a great job at that. They truly did. Yeah.
All right, we have a ton of questions in the chat, so I'll just start diving in to ask some of those. The first one is for Mike. And it says, the jury award to Lee Johnson was reduced because of a multiplier formula used in other civil cases and because compensatory damages apparently have to be based on projected life assuming cancer wins rather than the jury's decision to use projected life without cancer. The trial court judge did not discuss either of these issues in her instructions to the jury. Was she at fault?
You hate to criticize the judge, but I would think that issue should have been refined. In fairness to Brent Wisner, who did the closing argument, he framed his closing argument based upon, this is obviously an attorney asking this, based his closing argument on a comment that was in the jury instruction that year when we tried Lee's case. When I went to argue the appeal a year later, they had removed that comment from the back of the jury instruction. So, and Brent and I have talked about this many a time. If they had not had that comment, he would have argued it in a different way, and I don't think the damages would have been as restricted. So it's a nuanced issue, but I saw it with the George Floyd trial. You argue instructions on Friday, you give closing argument on Monday. It happens fast. So that's the backstory of what happened there.
Thank you for that. This one says, thank you for this powerful webinar and Carey, your fabulous book. I'm curious to know more about what opportunities you all see for passing regulations around toxic pesticides in the Biden administration or at the state level, and how cases like this and advocacy like Mackenzie's can help. Thanks, Anna LePay. And I think you saw if Jen was screen sharing earlier and Googling Anna to show that she works for Real Food Media, another nonprofit, and Anna's an activist. And yeah, this question can be for any of you.
I think Anna's the best position to answer that, right? Or maybe you, Mackenzie. I mean, the only thing I would say is I think we have seen encouraging moves and words from the Biden administration. The Trump administration basically opened up the doors and handed the keys over to, the corporate executives, particularly in the EPA. There was a memo that came out through, I can't remember when, which trial, which proceeding, but the White House has got Monsanto's back on glyphosate is basically one of the quotes that came out. But you've heard the Biden administration say very clearly, there's been wrongdoing. We need to go back and look at the decisions on various chemicals, glyphosate and dicamba and chlorpyrifos and others, and restore scientific integrity to the EPA. So they're saying all the right things. I think we need to see them make the right actions.
If I could add to that, I'm born and raised in Washington, still lobby there for some of my clients. 100% agree with Carey. The Trump administration literally handed the keys over to the executives of the pharmaceutical and herbicide companies, period. I have been awed by the quality of people at various levels that the Biden administration has put in the environmental EPA, DOJ, and other places. But with that said, you're still going to need your neighborhood trial lawyer. They just don't have enough time or manpower to monitor all these companies and all these activities. But I would have to say wholeheartedly, great people. They've got 4 years, hopefully 8 years, to clean the mess up that was made.
Yeah. And just to kind of add on to that, for Lee, Lee, where do you want to focus your energy on? If you could focus on getting herbicides and pesticides out of any areas, local or federal, where would you want to focus next?
I still and always have believed that it would be nice to have the label on that product to be a little bit changed or altered where it can express the dangers and at least give you the options to wear PPE and whatever. And even if they have to use the Johnson versus Monsanto name under there, just to say, since the Johnson versus Monsanto case, this is what you should be doing label. I think it should be a different label on there. The one thing I noticed that when you do see that stuff in the store, is the shelves are full of it. It's not like they're selling out anymore, like it's just a hot product. I think people have gotten the message, and that's what I want to do moving forward, is to continue to never let the message die. Because of our short attention spans these days, we could lose sight of this, or I could go on and start investing in stuff and get super rich and wouldn't care anymore. But I don't want that to be. I want to be grounded enough to where, just as new as the issue was when I got sick, that it stays that new, and that it stays that I keep my finger on it or my foot on it or something on it at all times, to where it's never not a part of my story, but just not the main part of my story. I definitely want it to take, take its place in my life for as long as I live.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next question from Alexandra from Australia. How often has rebranding of the products been used to confuse or mislead people in what they're buying? Has there been an effect with Monsanto now being Bayer? Yeah, whoever wants to take that question.
Mike, what do you think about that?
No effect whatsoever. It's the most frustrating part of what we've done. I mean, we may have gotten 11.6 billion, according to Bloomberg this morning, paid to clients, but the drug is still on the market, it's still in the Home Depot. There's no warning. The EPA in the next 4 years hopefully will change that, but Monsanto was bought by Bayer for a reason. They want to take over that seed industry worldwide. They're fighting with a company called Syngenta for domination over that seed control. And people thought I was crazy when I went after Monsanto. Those same people tell me I'm really crazy because I'm going after Syngenta right now. So, but yeah, I'd love to see that warning. I'd love to see that so that more people don't get hurt like Lee and have their lives altered. Yeah.
Yeah, how close do you think we are to getting that label, and what do we have to, like, can ordinary people play a part in that and pushing the EPA as well?
Yeah, certainly, and I don't know about in Australia, I hope so, but in America, absolutely. I mean, League of Conservation Voters, it's an amazing organization. There's so many great organizations, but, I do hobby in DC, and they're sensitive. Both sides of the aisle, but more so the Democrats, are sensitive to the pressure from their constituents. Let them know your environmental issues are critical to you. Push, push, push. And we'll get something done. We will get something done.
Mike, do you think that it's more important to have a label or to have it banned? Or where do you sit on that issue?
Label or what?
A ban.
So I don't think I don't know. but a complete ban, I'm not so sure. There may be instances where it could be used. I don't know whether there are or not, and I'm not trying to dodge it, but 100% a label. And I might equivocate a little bit. Remember, I mean, I've got family members that farm who claim anyway that they're going to quit farming if they can't have access to it. And I've done this debate in Omaha, and I've done this debate in, Decatur, Illinois on radio. And my thing is, look, if farmers think they need this, then they should at least be warned, and there should be absolutely no evidence that it's affecting their consumers. That would be the two things I would insist on. I don't think they should ever be allowed to use it to ripen crops. I think that's madness. Complete ban someday, maybe, but that to me would have to be phased in. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah, what I found out that, from just getting involved in this is that definitely what you think the EPA is supposed to do, the EPA does not do that. And I was taught what the EPA was supposed to do and how they're supposed to, when people get exposed to chemicals, how people, the doctors, even the hospital is supposed to report to the EPA, look, we heard this, we don't know if it's true or not, we don't know what really happened, but this guy from whatever town, Burger Town, whatever, he got exposed, and we just want to make note of it. Because if they would call and make note of it, then it would be more, evidence of what's going on. But most times the evidence train breaks down way low down on the line. And like people have told me when I started this whole thing, because it started way back, even before I had made the connection with the Miller firm, is that people told me, don't try to sue Monsanto. You can't win. They're connected to the government, this and this and that. It's all kind of stuff where people was like, just forget about it. Just take your cancer and go die, because you're not going to win against this company. Trust me, you won't win. And they'll ruin your life along the way as you go to trial. They're going to say this, they're going to say that. And, I was warned. Like, people was telling me, oh, no, not them. Don't try to go against them. So, yeah, I definitely hear you guys on all of that, because I was definitely warned as a plaintiff before I even met Mike. No, don't even try those guys.
Let me back up what Lee's saying. I mean, when Lee says he was active in this before we got involved, 100% true. He called. He figured this out. I mean, you can say, Lee's a groundskeeper. Lee's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. Not educated, but smarter than Dickens. He figured it out. He called Monsanto after a doctor told him, oh, no, I got the label here. It doesn't cause on foam. He didn't buy that. He called the company. And then they told him, oh, no, it doesn't have it. He called back 6 months later, and they flat out lied to him again. And so I got in, not my car, my plane, and I flew out to Missouri, and I asked the doctor who lied to him, why in the heck did you lie to him, right? When all these studies after studies show this stuff causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, why didn't you tell Lee Johnson when he called about this study or that study? So, yeah, Lee tried. His family doctor wouldn't buy what Lee figured out, and Monsanto wouldn't tell him the truth about what he figured out on his own before he ever called any lawyer. Yeah, true.
I gotta give a little plug here again for Mike, for the book, but Mike, watching you do depositions, I described Mike doing one of the depositions with Bill Hayden's, and it just, that masterful, like the way that you sort of reel him in and you get it, tripping up on his words, and you lay this trap and just bring him in and then lay out this detail that totally contradicts exactly what he
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I tried to really show that as best I could in the book, but it's just masterful, the strategies that you use to get the truth.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to do it for Lee Johnson. I'll tell you that, and his family.
I would like to say about the way that you wrote the book is that it really, as being the person that the book was written about and being the focal point of the book, and had never, like, how if you're somebody's writing a book or something, or you're writing a book, you get to see it as it's happening, or the person sends you some copies and let you see what they're writing. I didn't see any of that until the book was in its cover. And now that I'm sitting here reading the book, it's very interesting because it's things that I had no clue of. As being the person in the situation, I'm learning from the book, because I didn't sit there in every court briefing or every court day. I didn't sit there for the whole thing. I showed up and they released me to go hang out. And if they needed me, they called me back. But I'm learning so much about evidence and this and that. And it says this is the Monsanto Papers is what this book is called. It's definitely what this book is. It's serious. It's a lot of information that's like, man, I did not even know, even as the plaintiff. So it's a very informative book, and I think you did a very good job the way you set it up. It reads like a movie almost to a certain point. You feel like you're reading the novel from the movie based on such and such.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I wanted to do, Lee, and I wanted it to be a tribute to you and your strength and intelligence and heart and soul and Mike and everybody else. I really wanted that to come across in the book.
we're actually getting a ton of questions in the Q&A about a movie. If any of you know if there's any type of movie coming out about this, people are really interested in that.
So there are, all I can say is I have an entertainment attorney, I have contracts signed, and things are moving in Hollywood. I'm learning a lot about Hollywood, but that's all I can say.
All I can tell you is that when we first started this thing out, there was several movie offers on the table, and it even got to the point to where one of the people that were interested, I told them that the only way that they could do this movie is if they based the movie off of the information that they get from Carey. Because I noticed from Carey's information from the beginning when I first met her, she was very knowledgeable on this whole stuff, whole situation about Monsanto and the papers and everything. So I told them they need to make a movie about whatever she makes this book about me, that they need to base the movie on the book that she's writing.
Denzel Washington. We need Denzel to play Lee.
I know, Lee. All I can tell you is there are conversations about who could play Lee Johnson, and there are conversations about when can we go meet Lee Johnson. So at some point, hopefully, I'll be dragging some Hollywood types to your house if you're up for it. Hopefully.
Oh yeah, we'll see. I'm a yo-yo. I'm up and down. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. All right.
Well, we're going to wrap up in a second, and then I want to leave you all panelists if you want to make any closing statement or anything you want to say to the audience. See if there's one last question here that we can ask. Why was there no criminal trial against Monsanto, Bayer, and Roundup?
Mike.
Well, that's a great question. And we still wonder that. I mean, they were criminally indicted and found guilty in Hawaii for what they did unrelated to Lee. But why? I don't know. I mean, would everyone? Yeah. And the other I want to qualify about, should it be completely banned, Carey? I think it should be completely and totally forever banned from the retail market. And there's simply no reason to sell such a dangerous product at a Home Depot or wherever to be used at a school or at a home. That is outrageous. So the only qualifier I had is agriculture, but I don't know. Us trial lawyers, we can represent people and go get them a compensation, but we can't ban a product. We can't add a warning to a product, and we can't bring a charge. So I don't know.
And somebody asked me this the other day, Mike, why can we not hold corporate executives? The companies pay a fine or they pay a settlement, but you never see the executives actually held accountable. And the Monsanto executives, man, they scored big, right? They sold this off to Bayer just as Lee's trial was starting and walked away with several millions of dollars in their pockets. And right? I mean, there's been no accountability to those people at Monsanto.
We need to reform the court. All right, we need 13 justices, tried and true. I have. That's what I think. I think we need changes. I think corporate executives should be held accountable for their actions when these are the results. Yes, I agree.
And I just had a super quick follow-up to that, Mike, that I want to ask you. so, you know, you've uncovered all these internal emails. Do you think corporations are still emailing secret things to each other, or have they moved on to a different platform that they can easily delete and can't be used in trial?
I may tell you, I got a great answer for you, Mackenzie. I don't know where you were in 1997, but I was sitting at my desk looking at documents from a company called American Home Products. They made a diet drug. And a friend of mine had a case where a lady took it to lose 10 pounds to get her wedding dress, and she was dead before her wedding date. And so we were doing that litigation, right? It was outrageous. And we found really nasty emails, and we settled for billions of dollars way back when. But I thought to myself in 1997, this is it. There'll never be any more of this. No way corporations, even if they are this evil, wouldn't put it in writing, right? But I keep seeing it. I keep seeing it. It's human nature.
All right, if you all want to just leave the audience with any last thoughts, and then we'll turn it over to Jen for the last minute to make some announcements.
I would just like to say thanks to everybody for your
I could never
continued...
close something like this without it. I think most folks that are listening to this, I hope they are feeling good about getting justice for Lee Johnson. You wouldn't get it in 95% of the countries in the world. And the only reason you're getting it in America, not because we have an EPA, because we have a Democrat in the White House, it's because the Constitution allows you the right to a trial by jury. If we limit that right to trial by jury and limit those crazy, crazy trial lawyers that do that, if you limit them from doing that, you take away Americans' fundamental rights. Protect that right to trial by jury.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Lee, what were you going to say?
I just want to say thanks to everybody on this panel for having me on the panel. Thanks to everybody that's listening in. And thanks to everybody that's given me all of this support throughout this case. Before the verdict, during, after, everybody was very positive. And that's what I just want to say thanks to any and everybody that's involved. Because I can't tell each one individually. So hopefully whoever's listening, they'll know that I appreciate them. And thanks for your support throughout this struggle.
And you got a lot of love in the comments, Lee. I didn't get to ask or read off everything, but a lot of people commented and just said how inspired they are by you. And I think Jen put your website in here, antlee.com. Go listen to Lee's music. It's awesome. Thank you for being
That's
here.
beautiful. Thanks a lot, Jen.
And Carey, if you want any final words.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you, Lee, for taking the time and showing up, and Mike too. I know you guys have bigger, better things in the world to be tackling right now. And so Lee, I hope I get to see you soon. I'm sorry you're struggling so much with the pain still. Mike, thank you again for all your time and generosity and helping me get information and for the book. And thanks everybody. Thanks.
We enjoyed it. Lee, good luck, man. We love you.
Mackenzie,
all right, thanks a lot, everybody.
And Jen, if you have any final, you want to make your announcements?
Sure, yes. Thank you again as well for everyone for joining. Please get your copy of the Monsanto Papers. We have it for a great price right now. And we really appreciate the panel for participating today. So thank you so much for everyone for being here. If you'd like to donate to the Herbicide-Free Campus Network, please do so. I'm including that information in the chat. They're doing wonderful work. We are so appreciative of Mackenzie for partnering with us on this conversation. We'll have a recording out to you soon. Please fill out the survey, and thank you all for participating.
Thank you so much. And just to give you an idea, we can, with $1,000, we can start this campaign at a new school. So it's a pretty tangible thing. We want to get this going at every school in the country. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you, panelists, for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye.